Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. We are continuing the Gracchi series. This is part 6. We're going to do this part. Then there's an extra bonus part called Lies. That's an interesting thing I learned about. So we'll do that after this. This is called the Gracchus the Elder. It's a prequel. We're doing some sort of Quentin Tarantino to this series. We're going forward and backwards and whatnot. So let's do that. So this is called In His Footsteps. All right, let's jump right into it and see what we got, boys and girls.
Mike, hello everybody. We are super excited today to have Mike Duncan writing a guest episode for the show. He is the creator of the History of Rome podcast, which partly inspired the very first episode of this show ever, and the incredible Revolutions podcast, which you should absolutely check out as he's going over the life of Simon Bolivar in far more detail than we ever could. Even though, incidentally, we will be covering Simon Bolivar in a couple of months ourselves. Anyway, big thank you to Mike for writing this episode. In the 5 episodes we just made about the Gracchi brothers, we only briefly mentioned their father twice. Now, this is understandable, as his sons have come to overshadow him in the eyes of history, but in his own time, this guy had one of the greatest political and military careers imaginable. Understanding him is key to understanding the sons who wanted so badly to follow in his footsteps. So let's dive into the life of this elder Gracchi and the profound effect he had on his sons.
Let's do it. And I forget, Scipio, wasn't Scipio Africanus related somehow to Tiberius? I cannot remember the exact lineage, but I remember. And if it was it just Tiberius or was it both of them? I cannot remember if it was a grandfather or a stepfather. I am so mad at myself, but let me know if I am mistaken.
Tiberius Gracchus the Elder was born just as the Second Punic War drew to a close. He first stepped onto the stage of history in 190 BCE in the midst of the Seleucid War, which was being waged by the consul Lucius Cornelius Scipio with assistance from his brother, the legendary Scipio Africanus. Gracchus was described by Livy as far and away the sharpest young man of that time. The Scipio brothers clearly felt the same, since they entrusted him with a vital mission. They needed him to secure safe passage for the legions as they marched across the Hellespont in pursuit of King Antiochus of Syria.
Very interesting.
And Tiberius Gracchus delivered. The troops marched safely, Antiochus was defeated, and the Scipios won yet another great victory on behalf of the advancing Roman Empire. With Antiochus defeated, the Scipios remained in the east to arrange a final political settlement. During that process, they also served as a clearinghouse for huge sums of money passing every which way. In addition to the piles of plunder won during the war, the brothers managed disbursements from Rome to cover legionary expenses, and were all too willing to accept bribes from local kings looking to secure Roman goodwill. By the time their work in the East was done, the brothers had frankly made out like bandits, and this landed them in pretty hot water when they returned home. Despite the fact that the Scipio brothers were now multiple times over the saviors of Rome, they found themselves charged with corruption. But luckily for them, just as charges were being brought, that same promising young Tiberius Gracchus was elected tribune of the plebes. And just as the trial was set to begin, Gracchus vetoed the proceedings.
I mean, this isn't a good thing. Corruption isn't a good thing. So, Tiberius Gracchus the Elder is a participant on this. You know, you can look at the great things that the Scipios did accomplish, but if you get all the way to the top and then you falter, that's a show of character. Just my opinion.
A tribune's veto was absolute. To the Scipios' great relief, the trial was stopped dead in its tracks. No doubt as a gesture of thanks for saving their hides, Scipio Africanus arranged a marriage between Gracchus and his daughter Cornelia. She was not only one of the most eligible bachelorettes in Rome, but an amazing woman in her own right. This was as advantageous a marriage as an ambitious young politician could land. Gracchus was a rising star, and he meant to make the most of it. When he was elected aedile in 182, he aimed to make his name known far and wide by throwing the most lavish set of public games anyone had ever seen. And he succeeded. His games were, in fact, so ridiculously lavish that the Senate passed a law restricting the amount of money that could be spent on games in the future.
Dang.
Gracchus, now well known
which probably will not stay. You know, that might just be a republic decree versus like the imperial decrees. Given that I know that there's crazy amount of Colosseum games and so forth once the imperial empire begins.
Well-connected and much beloved by the people, was then elected praetor in 180 and assigned to the province of Nearer Spain. There he would make his greatest mark. See, for the better part of a generation, the Celtiberians of Nearer Spain had been in revolt against the encroaching Romans. Gracchus turned that lengthy impasse right around with a fresh campaign that struck wide and hit hard. Later, he would claim to have sacked 300 different cities during his campaign.
That's a crazy amount. It could be inflated too, but 300 cities is wild.
Granted, Gracchus's definition of what qualifies as a city was broad enough to include lonely watchtowers and small collections of huts, but still. But more important than his conquests was Gracchus's subsequent peace settlement. The Celtiberians were in revolt largely because they had been left insecure and landless by decades of turmoil in Spain. So Gracchus took it upon himself to gather the poor together into a community and distribute land to them. And it worked. It was as much this redistribution of land as the Romans' military might which secured peace in Nearer Spain for the next 25 years. Since the story of Gracchus the Elder's legendary exploits in Spain would have been told to his sons Tiberius and Gaius time and time again, it's little wonder that redistribution of land became so central to their own radical reform efforts down the road. And, of course, Gracchus the Elder's successful settlement is the reason his son Tiberius was the only man the Numantines would discuss terms with years later when they
Yeah, I conflated the two then. I conflated Scipio Africanus with Tiberius the Elder then. I don't know how I did that. Either it was misconstrued within the layers of the first episode, or I just misconstrued it myself. But yeah, that makes perfect sense with the parallels with Tiberius the Elder and then Tiberius the Younger is what I'll say. Very, very much a parallel there, and that makes perfect sense why the Iberian or what do you call them? The Celtiberians? Let me see. The Numantines. Oh, the Numantines. Numantines. So that makes perfect sense why they would, be very warm towards a Tiberius the Younger.
Trapped the legions of Gaius Mancinus. For his service in Spain, Gracchus justly received a triumph when he returned home.
That's
he was
huge.
Also promptly elected consul in 177.
I don't think he overshadowed anyone. Was overshadowed if he was doing all this. He helped secure the routes for the Seleucid War. He saved the skin off the Scipio brothers. He became one of the peacemakers of Iberia. He became consul. There's only a select number of consuls.
But he secured this position by playing a dangerous game in the world of elite family rivalries. You see, in Rome, they always elected 2 consuls to serve at the same time, and you would generally want your co-consul to be somebody you got along with, like, say, someone from your wife's famous and powerful family. But Gracchus's partner in the consulship was not one of his Scipio in-laws, but Gaius Claudius Pulcher, leader of the ancient and venerable Claudii family.
I should know this, but I don't.
Who just happened to be major rivals of the Scipios. Gracchus walked a very narrow political tightrope by attaching himself to the Claudii. Really, it was a major accomplishment that he managed to thrive while playing the great senatorial families off of each other. A lesser man would have wound up with a long knife lodged in his back. But his back remained knife-free, and now he had alliances with 2 of the most powerful families in Rome. He was no longer dependent solely on the Scipios to keep building his power and influence, and his alliance with the Claudii was built to last. Their sons would be staunch allies in the land reform struggles to come, with a young Appius Claudius serving as Tiberius Gracchus the Younger's legislative partner and principal backer in the Senate. Riding high off of his political victory at home, Gracchus approached his military assignment as consul with a swagger in his step. He had been assigned to protect the people of Sardinia from a pair of rebellious tribes, so he waged a sharp campaign just like he had in Spain, and brought peace back to the island.
Yeah, we forget about those islands just sitting out there. Sardinia, Corsica, and Sicily. Of course, they get a lot of attention during like major wars, like the Punic Wars, but They are part of Rome.
So, just as in Spain, the Gracchi name was also honored in Sardinia. Remember when we talked about Gaius going to the people of Sardinia and imploring them to donate clothes to the soldiers during that harsh winter?
Yeah, and that, of course, he was stationed there for a little bit.
Well, his words carried extra weight with the people that day, thanks to the memory of his father.
So both his sons had a trickled-down warmth from the natives, given their father's previous doings.
For his services in Sardinia, Gracchus was subsequently awarded a second triumph, which was a nearly unprecedented feat in those days. Gracchus then...
It's almost like, what do you call it? Octavian, and how he was like, let's get another triumph in there.
Proceeded on to his next prestigious accomplishment. He was elected censor for the year 169, sharing office once again with his old consular colleague, Gaius Claudius Pulcher. After his term as censor, Gaius joined a traveling embassy of senators on a trip through the eastern Mediterranean. Their job was to assess the status of the various client kingdoms, and Gracchus wrote a glowing endorsement of the Attalid dynasty of Pergamum. This forged a permanent friendship between the Attalids and the Gracchi. There's a reason Tiberius the Younger was later able to pounce so quickly when word arrived that the king of Pergamum had died, and willed the kingdom to Rome. Tiberius heard about the will before the Senate did, because the ambassador bringing the news literally stayed in his house. Again, we see the work of Tiberius Gracchus the Elder flowing directly to the events of 133. A few years later, Gracchus achieved yet another remarkable feat, winning a second consulship in 162. But here he sowed a far more negative seed for his sons. At the end of his term, Gracchus oversaw the election of the next year's consuls. Every election was also supposed to be overseen by an augur, who, in keeping with Rome's ancient traditions, observed the flight of the birds and announced whether or not the gods approved of holding a vote that day.
Bruh. I make fun of it, but they don't. They didn't. They thought this was right.
But on this election day, Gracchus ignored the augur's warning about inauspicious omens, at least until he found out who won. Then he hastily claimed to have messed up part of the ritual, and that the newly elected consuls must resign, or the gods would be mad. One of the two men screwed out of his consulship was Publius Scipio Nasica Corculum. Remember when Tiberius was trying to get re-elected tribune, and the senators were in a frenzy over Tiberius's power plays and trying to get the consul to do something about it, but the consul refused, and then that one senator leapt up to his feet and said, "Since then the chief magistrate betrays the senate, do ye who wish to succor the laws follow me," and then led the violent attack which killed Tiberius and his followers? That guy was Publius Scipio Nasica Serapio, the son of the man Gracchus the Elder had...
Oh, there's a lot of avengement within all that.
Once screwed out of a consulship. I will leave it to you to determine where political ideology leaves off and personal grudges begin.
So there is the precedent was even prior to Tiberius the Younger. It was set by his father.
At the close of his second consulship, the now supremely eminent Gracchus joined yet another traveling embassy working its way through Greece and Asia. On his trip, Gracchus made further contacts and forged deeper bonds with foreign clients, whose wealth and influence could be called upon to help the family's political agenda back in Rome. See, the thing to understand is that when he finally retired from public life in the 160s, Tiberius Gracchus the Elder was not just another prominent senator. He was quite literally one of the most powerful men in Rome. Any Roman politician who won a single consulship, or who had been awarded a single triumph, could retire justly proud of a great political career.
But he doubled both of those. Plus, he had a lot of other accomplishments.
Tiberius won 2 consulships, and had been awarded 2 triumphs. And he was not just linked to a powerful family. He lived at the intersection of the greatest families in Rome. And on top of that, he was miles ahead of his contemporaries on developing extensive foreign client networks, which allowed his family to dip into the wealth and power of the provinces. The Gracchi name was now spoken across the empire with respect, deference, and allegiance. As he settled in to begin raising a family, Tiberius Gracchus the Elder was nothing less than a living legend. In the world of elite Roman politics, you always aimed to at least match the feats of your ancestors, and hopefully do them one better. For Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, this would have been a daunting assignment. The weight of their father's accomplishments must have weighed heavy on their minds, and I think the looming question of how on earth do we surpass the fame of our father is an underappreciated motivating factor behind their subsequent conduct. But amazingly enough, they did surpass the fame of their father, which is why they got
I think they were more notorious, maybe not as accomplished.
5 episodes, and dear old dad's incredible life is reduced to one measly prequel. But his life echoes through the history of Rome, not only for the feats he performed or for the sons he bore, but for the very way he viewed the provinces and the model of foreign clients. He may not have created this model, but he certainly demonstrated to everybody watching how it could forever change the power structure of Rome.
Well, I think that his father is definitely overshadowed by his children in terms of coverage, in terms of being notorious. However, just the accomplishments alone of 2x triumphs and consulships should initiate their father to be a little bit more prestigious, especially with like the precedents that were created that revolved when Tiberius took his position. Same with Gaius. Of course, they met a interesting fate where, not the best fate in terms of how they were killed. However, I think the Tiberius the Elder really set the stage for his children, given what we saw in how he handled stuff in Sardinia, how he handled stuff amongst the two families, how he handled stuff in Iberia, how he maneuvered, becoming more of an envoy, but also an embassy across in Roman world as well as the outskirts to understand networks and growing the power structure from that network. And of course, he has amazing ties to the Scipios, specifically with the war against Antiochus and the Seleucid War. So this is a very interesting episode. I did not understand all this. I did not know that all this occurred. So glad that we were doing these episodes. We have one more, which is more like of course, this is my first time ever really diving into extra history, so I won't really understand what the bonus episode is until we do it. But of course, it's called Lies, which I think is like a referendum, maybe of what's gone on, and maybe it's also like a opportunity to talk about things that were either hashed over slightly or maybe things that were missed. We'll have to see. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace out. Bye bye.